Growing up, I remember visiting my grandpa's farm multiple times over the years. During these visits, I got to experience firsthand the hard work that farming is and how expensive it is compared to how much money comes in. This experience has given me an appreciation for the rural community and not wanting for me to leave the rural areas behind as I pursue my dreams. As I learned about the transition to greener fuels, I began to realize how impractical electrifying small farms would be. And then I discovered hydrogen and its benefits in rural areas. This background is the lens that I view hydrogen and the clean energy transition. This lens also informs how I write this essay and present my findings. So, should hydrogen be used in agriculture? And if so, what are the barriers to adoption? This essay will cover the current state of the conversation, what research has been completed, and what are the benefits of hydrogen, and what are the potential solutions to these gaps in the conversation around hydrogen in the rural context. So, what is the state of the conversation? Hydrogen research currently mainly focuses on hydrogen in the urban context rather than in the rural context. What this means is that the rural perspective isn't getting as much attention as it should. In my research, I have read 9 different scientific articles, and only 2 exclusively looked at hydrogen in the rural context. So, what do all these articles have in common? And what do the articles disagree on? Firstly, they all agree that hydrogen is going to be a part of the energy mix as the world transitions to cleaner energy sources and away from fossil fuels. However, it is not agreed upon as to if the internal combustion engines powered by hydrogen should be used alongside fuel cell stacks to power hydrogen vehicles. Perhaps the market will decide that, but in the meantime, they do agree that for small applications where just a battery pack won't work, that a hydrogen fuel cell works great. Another thing agreed upon is that the components of a hydrogen refueling system should be separated a minimum distance from flammable items and ignition sources in the case of a hydrogen leak. This means that while hydrogen does have its applications and benefits, the conversation generally agrees that the proper separation distances need to take place. Another issue that is generally agreed upon is that the 2 best ways to store hydrogen easily is in the liquid state at temperatures as low as 20 degrees Kelvin or negative 424 Fahrenheit, or under pressures of 300 to 700 bar. For context, a propane tank stores propane at around 150 psi, and an HVAC system using R410A can have pressures as high as 335 psi under normal conditions. So now that we've looked at the agreements, what are the gaps in the conversation? The biggest gap is the lack of research focusing on hydrogen in the rural context. However, there are companies like JCB and CNH Industrial who are looking into hydrogen as a clean fuel source for heavy machinery like excavators and tractors. While this is great news for farmers thinking about how they can stay ahead, this research is still relatively new and has several challenges. If you were to look on Google Scholar, for example, for hydrogen articles that look at hydrogen exclusively in the rural context, you're only likely to find a few. What are the challenges for hydrogen in rural areas? The biggest challenges for hydrogen in the rural context is the upfront costs and lack of existing infrastructure. So, what's the infrastructure problem? Well, hydrogen infrastructure in the US is looking in urban areas that are generally far away from the farming regions of those states. As you can see from this map, hydrogen fuel stations are located mostly in California and the urban centers of a select few other states that have existing stations. You may be wondering if hydrogen fueling stations exist already, why can't farmers just ride their tractors in town to refuel? The simple answer is that it's impractical for farmers and ranchers to do so. The long answer requires a little bit of context. So, let's take a look at a hypothetical. If a farmer that is, say, located in Stillwater, Oklahoma, needs to refuel fuel their hydrogen tractor, and the closest station is about 50 miles away near Keystone Lake. Our hypothetical farmer could travel at an average speed of 25 miles an hour, and that would take them about 2 hours just to get to the station to fuel up the tractor. Now, while there is no current hydrogen station in Oklahoma, I bring this example up to illustrate how far away hydrogen is from those who could benefit the most: farmers and ranchers. The other challenge is cost. Unfortunately, as hydrogen is an emerging technology as an alternative fuel, it is quite expensive to implement when compared to diesel. In 2021, CNH Industrial estimated that the cost of equipment just to produce hydrogen on site is approximately $1,200 to $3,000 per kilogram of H2 per day. This, combined with the high cost of fuel cells, makes hydrogen a expensive but potentially rewarding investment for farmers. So, those are the biggest challenges I see, but what research has been done already? Well, the research that I have found focuses on 3 key areas: the use of hydrogen, hydrogen storage technologies, and hydrogen fuel stations. These are the 3 areas that all have a portion that can involve the rural context. To begin, let's look at research looking at hydrogen's use. One article describes how hydrogen bus was implemented on a test route between Lebanon, Rolla, and Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri. This article discussed the beginning phases of implementation, but unfortunately I was unable to find an article discussing the results. The project to use a hydrogen fuel cell bus and a hydrogen fuel station was built in Rolla, Missouri to supply the bus with hydrogen. This project was conducted with the Missouri University of Science and Technology and the Department of Defense. The other article is a 2023 study that looks at all the potential uses for fuel cells in agriculture. The study looked at the benefits and the challenges to implementation of hydrogen fuel cells in agriculture, and what was found is that the biggest challenge to adoption was cost and lack of awareness. So the author recommended that investment and education are key to the adoption of hydrogen technologies. Now, both of these articles I have found focused on hydrogen in the rural context and hydrogen fuel cells in particular. I have not found an article talking about hydrogen being used in a internal combustion engine. So that is one of the gaps in terms of hydrogen's use. So now let's take a look at how hydrogen is stored. So there are many different studies and experiments that look at hydrogen storage in various different contexts. But I would like to highlight 2 studies. Both of these studies are broad overviews of the research into hydrogen storage technologies, and they both only briefly cover storing hydrogen in liquid and the gaseous state. Both articles instead go into detail about liquid organic hydrogen carriers and solid-state hydrogen storage methods, both of which have drawbacks and potential benefits. Liquid organic hydrogen carriers have the most benefits, though, and this is because ammonia could be used as a fuel or as a fertilizer for crops. This means that more research should be done into hydrogen storage, and maybe more fertilizers or uses are discovered for these new storage technologies. Both articles did agree, however, that hydrogen equipment does require a pressure relief valve as a safety device in case of a sudden increase of pressure in the tanks. Lastly, there's hydrogen fuel station safety. I have read several articles about the safety of hydrogen fuel station, and I'm only going to briefly summarize them here. And all of them concluded that the biggest risk was a hydrogen leak igniting. Most of these studies focused on fuel stations in the urban context, however, and only one looked at hydrogen in a more general context. Now, I'm not saying that the findings from these articles should be discredited. What I am saying is that the safety risks of a hydrogen fueling station on, say, a family farm are different from the safety risks on a station in a big city. And another thing is that most of these articles focused on hydrogen fuel stations and developing the safety codes. So these articles, while they looked at station safety in the urban context, some of the researchers probably did have the rural context in mind. So now that we have the research covered. What are the potential benefits of hydrogen in the real context? Well, there are several benefits, but I'm only going to highlight a few. Existing diesels could run off of hydrogen. Hydrogen can be used as backup power. Hydrogen can be used in fuel cells to produce electricity, and hydrogen can be generated on site. And because hydrogen can be generated on site, it can be sold if there's an excess of hydrogen on the farm. I'm sure there are many more benefits that I have not listed here, but these are the few that I'm going to focus on in this video. So, most farm machinery, such as tractors, run off of diesel internal combustion engines. With recent price spikes in diesel, farmers are likely to look into alternative fuels. One of those alternatives is hydrogen. The benefit of hydrogen is that it can either be combusted in an internal combustion engine or combined with oxygen to produce water and electricity in a fuel cell. Hydrogen combusts similarly to diesel, which means that existing diesel internal combustion engines and newer internal combustion engines could be converted to run off of hydrogen instead of diesel. Cummins and JCB are already looking into developing engines that run off of hydrogen or can run off hydrogen or diesel. And since hydrogen is able to be produced on the farm, farmers like my grandpa can have more consistent energy costs as opposed to the volatility of fossil fuels. Farmers can build solar arrays that shade crops, and ranchers can build shady areas in the pasture for their livestock. This green energy from solar arrays can be used to generate hydrogen that can either be then sold or used to power equipment on the farm. Any hydrogen that does get sold can reimburse the energy and feed costs of the farm. Lastly, hydrogen can be used for backup power in fuel cells. Hydrogen is a great backup power source since it can be generated on site and doesn't require electricity from the grid. So what this means is that farmers can use less electricity from the grid to power barns that aren't necessarily the main house. And in case of power outage, the farmer doesn't have to wait on the electric company to fix the power lines just to get electricity at the farm again. Alright, so how can we solve the gaps in the conversation and increase adoption of hydrogen in the rural context? The simplest way is to actually build hydrogen fuel stations in rural areas and build uses for that generated hydrogen. With more infrastructure built out in rural areas, research and adoption can increase quickly. While the initial cost of hydrogen generation on site is expensive, the potential benefits, in my opinion, far outweigh the downsides. So what could the newly generated hydrogen be used for? The hydrogen can be used in fuel cells that power barns and buildings around the farm while reducing the electrical costs, or it can be used to power tractors. The increase in hydrogen infrastructure in rural areas will do two things. One, it increases awareness of hydrogen and its benefits. And two, because of that increased awareness, more people are likely to be inspired to research more about hydrogen and adopt hydrogen as a fuel source. So, as far as research is concerned, more studies and experiments need to be conducted with hydrogen being generated and used on a farm and or ranch. This could include researching whether a fuel cell or an internal combustion engine is better for different applications, and what are safe areas and distances to set hydrogen storage and generation on farms, and using hydrogen to generate fertilizer like ammonia. These research projects will be able to better inform farmers, ranchers, and companies on what hydrogen-powered equipment should be developed and or built. So, if hydrogen continues to be an afterthought, and investments continue to focus on battery electric vehicles and machinery, farmers and ranchers can be priced out of the jobs and that they love. Folks like my grandpa, who grew up farming all their life, could be forced to move away because of just how expensive fuel and equipment are to buy and or maintain. Hydrogen offers a green alternative that has numerous uses around farms and can be generated on site, normalizing fuel costs.